I'm a boat builder from the Cotswolds in the UK, and I'm building a boat called Temptress, designed by Michelle Berrier and kitted by myself to be built utilising the latest in CAD design, CNC cutting and modern epoxy wood construction. In the previous video I got the keel back out of the boat, took a load of lines off of various different stations and shaped that keel. The next thing to move on to is going to be the chines, so that's what I'm going to do in this video. So I'll start out by running through a few of the jobs that I did just to get me up to the stage that I am now. So the keel came back out of the boat and had to be epoxy coated before I could bond that in. Same process as I've done throughout everything else with this boat. It gets sanded back with 80 grit and then coated with West System 105-207. The old roll and tip method works really well, and that's what I've been using for all the processes so far. Once 3 coats of that applied, the following day that gets sanded back nice and flat again with 80 grit to make sure that it's sufficiently keyed so that I can bond to it for further operations within the boat. I then had the 4 frames to sand and coat that were in the cockpit region of the boat. If you remember, these are a little bit complex in the way that they go together, so they couldn't be coated before they went in. So I did those in place just by removing the strong back legs 2 pairs at a time and then replacing them once those frames were coated and pre-sanded. Following on from that, the keel could be bonded in. So we just did a trial fit just to make sure that that was definitely going to fit post having an epoxy coating on it. Then it gets degreased and then bonded in using the 2-step bonding process. So any bare wood, particularly end grain, gets wetted out first with unthickened epoxy. Then thickened epoxy gets applied with a notch spreader just to make sure I've got a nice even glue line in every area. And of course, remembering not to bond that frame 10 area to the keel, which we're going to remove further on down the line. And a clean up on the inside with Wonder Wipes, which is made nice and easy with that pre-coating process. Lovely bit of English weather. Brings all kinds of visitors into the shop. A little toad coming up through the floor there. Say hello. So I'm going to be doing the chines in this one. The chines are a fairly complex collection of a few different timbers that we use and the way in which we make up the chine. So it's got this timber that runs across the top here, which is kind of typical of what you'd see of a hard chined boat. So this is the chine clamp. That's a lamination that's made up of 2 different layers, and I'll be exploring utilizing a new CNC cut scarf system as well, which you can see here. So I've done a hooked version of the scarf joint that I did for the keel. So we've got the top clamp of the chine. We've then got a stack of plywood parts that make up the chine flat on Temptress. This is originally designed to be 3 layers of 12mm plywood to make up this big stack of timber. And the reason it's stacked is that that layered lamination allows us to form the curvature in the profile view, and then in the plan view, the curvature of the chine is cut by CNC cutting those plywood pieces. So that will go on top of the chine clamp, and I'm going to do something slightly different with that as well, again because I don't really want to see any exposed plywood on the inside of this boat. So instead of doing 3 layers of 12, I'm going to do 2 layers of 12, 1 layer of 9, and then I'm going to make up the rest with a veneer which will be on the internal face. We'll get to that in a bit. And then on top of that chine stack, there's going to be a little molded rail that runs down, and it just fills in the triangular section where the bottom planking will eventually come down and land onto that chine flat. So there's a handful of different things to work out. So I'm starting with the chine clamp, and as you can see, I've just got some timbers mocked up here. So let's get into that. We'll pick up with sizing those timbers, and then doing these new scarf joint variation that I've got underway. So let's get that in first. So I start by cleaning up some of the landings for all the timbers that I'm about to install, and that's just because I got a small amount of epoxy squeezed out on them from when I've bonded the frames to the bulkheads. Then I can start a dry fit process of offering up the timbers that are going to go into place here. Now, if you remember the CNC cut scarf process that I used for the keel, that's actually able to cut off my timber as well as cut the scarf joint on it. So here what I'm doing is just marking where I want those scarf joints to lie, and I want to stagger them between layers in between frames. I then put that mark along the line that you can see on the fixture that I've got on the CNC there, let the machine do its thing, and it puts a scarf on the end of my timber and cuts off the timber at the same time. And you can see that slight little S-shaped curve in the center of the scarf there just gives me a hook to stop that slipping during gluing. Once I'm happy that all of this is going to work, I can size all of the stock for my chines. And I'm again using utility here, the same as I have done throughout the rest of the framing on the boat. And again, one of the great things of having that CNC is not just the time that it saves you, but it's the fact that you can be doing other jobs whilst it's working away. So it's like having a great little apprentice sat in the corner cutting scarf joints for you. So I'm getting the first layer of the chine clamp in. There's going to be 2 of these in total, which is going to make up the full thickness of what we need. Next job is to land that into the stem, and I am trying to remember the very good method that Andrew taught me back in January for marking this out. So I'm going to have a pop at doing that next, see if I can remember it. So I've got a clamp on the outer end of the chine clamp here, just to give me a little bit more leverage. That's going to allow me to twist that timber in, pull it into place, and also, I'm kind of doing this on my own, this allows me to just get my body into that clamp, kind of push that in place and then hold it where it needs to be whilst I do the marking stuff. So what I need is a little bit of material, an offcut material that's the same width as the stock that I'm doing here. So I've got that. I'm going to use that to transpose the face of the stem angle back out onto my timber. And I need a little ruler and a pencil as well, and that should be it. So this timber here, the chine clamp is landing into this face here. This is the landing for the chine flat, which is going to sit on top of here. That's the landing for the chine clamp. That's the landing for the top side batten that is going to sit just above it here and come in together. And you probably see it better on the other side. So chine flat, top clamp, top side batten, and then these are all top side battens as well. So let's get that marked up. So what I'm going to do first of all is pick up the shape of the stem here on the back face of this timber. So as you can see, I can use my clamp here to kind of position that in. I'm going to bring it in and get it so that it's sat flush here against the stem. You can see I want the twist to match that of the stem, so I use my clamp to do that. Then I'm just going to draw up the back side of that. Then I want to transpose that line straight across the top and bottom of the timber. So just chuck my ruler on there, come straight across 90 degrees. Do that on the bottom as well. And then I can transpose that line around to the outside of that timber. So that's gotten the profile of my stem on the outside of the timber that I'm about to cut. Now I need to get the angle of that timber onto here. So that's what this piece of wood's for, piece of stock that's the same thickness as what I'm installing. I'm going to put that up against the face of that. Then I'm going to bring my chine timber back in until I meet this point here. So this is the point that I want to feather down to. So I'm going to come in with that. And again, this helps just having this clamp here, because I can just use my body to push that in to place. I can come in just until I'm meeting that point up there, and then I can transpose that line across. Mark my scrap side. And that then gives me the shape of what I need to cut off. So this is the angle of the face of the side of the stem there. And that's the angle for the forward edge. So we'll cut off the scrap, we'll land that, and hopefully I've got that right. We'll see if it fits. Okay, so that's got me pretty damn close. I'm probably a little bit high on the back side here. You can't quite see it, but on this sort of, as we come away from that face, it's just going to allow me to tuck this back in a little bit more like that. But that's fine. I'm going to need to do a little bit of trimming with a block plane anyway. And as I always say to you, cut just outside the line and then we'll trim back into it. So that is certainly pretty close as a starting point. Now the other thing I'm going to need to do is move this back. This timber isn't actually going to sit here. The outer timber, there's a second layer that's going to go on here, and that needs to finish flush with the front of the stem. So this timber has now actually got to shift further back, and then I can get the outer one over the top of it. So I'll do the same process on the outer one, and then we'll shift these around and we'll try and get the two of them landed at the same time. And I'll do that trim with the block plane of that once the outer timber is in place and I'm happy with it. Okay, so that has got me within trimming room. Came a little bit away from the line there, as you can see, but a couple of passes with the block plane will be right back on target there. It's not a problem. Okay, so I said I thought it was a little bit too much material, a little bit fat on this bottom side here. I think actually what I was meant to do was to pick up the bevel angle. So the angle that I marked on the outside of the timber, what I need to do is pick that up with a bevel gauge, transfer that to the inside. Over here. And then you can see the line that I cut kind of runs here. But I need to take that back to there, and that's going to get me that face correct. So I'll do that with a block plane. So nearly in. What I'm trying to do at the moment is find out where this actually wants to lie. Obviously I know where that line wants to lie because that wants to be tip of the stem, but really what I want to know is where this back line is. And as I'm explaining it to you, I've realised, why don't I just measure that and put a tick mark there. I'll do that. So I can position this one first in its correct place and land it there, and then bring the outer one in to it. I'm going to measure it, that makes sense. Just thought of that as I'm speaking to you, so I should do that now. Okay, so that is 72 millimeters. If I measure along there, 72. Okay, that is the point at which the tip of the inner layer wants to start. So let's get that in. Okay, so I am happy, if I can do this whilst holding the camera, but you have to trust me. When that springs in, tip of that sits in line with that, and the front edge is parallel to the lamination lines, which is a good indication. So that can sit in place. What I'm going to do next is transfer the frame markings down on each of the stations. You can see I did that roughly originally like this. Another one of Andrew's tips that he taught me. Obviously I've shifted that back now because I've cut the forward end and I've brought that back to where it wants to sit. So those have all moved. So I'm going to remark those to where the chine's actually going to be. And the good thing about that is that it means that when I install this, which I think I'll do next, I'll glue this in, I can start on any frame and I know that the front is going to land, so I haven't got to start right up forward and then work my way back. I can start anywhere, so I'll do that next. So once I've got the forward section of the chine clamp installed, I can start to run the aft section back through. Now of course the transom isn't notched for this yet, so I need to try and determine the position of that transom notch, both for the flat lamination that's going to run through, but also for the clamp that I'm currently working on. This is a straight section of the boat, so I can use a straight edge to run that line on through from the frames in front of it and make sure that I've got everything in the correct place. And then I'm just going to double check those measurements and verify those using a measurement down to waterline 1, so you can see I've got the laser on there and I'm just checking the heights so that they match the 3D model. Fine adjustments are just finished up with the Japanese saw file, which is a tool that I can highly recommend if you're doing work similar to this. I want to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to everybody that is helping to support this project on Patreon, because I'm trying to self-fund this boat. That is quite a difficult undertaking at times, and I greatly appreciate the extra support from you guys. If you would like to help support the channel and support this project, then I would greatly appreciate you jumping onto there and seeing what you're able to do. In return, you can get yourself early access to all of these videos and some merch for various different tiers on Patreon as well. So if you're able to support, I greatly appreciate that, as it helps me to start to be able to dedicate more of my time towards making these videos for you. So I'm just getting this chine clamp installed back aft, cutting the notches to land this in the transom, and there's something that almost kind of tripped me up here. When I was starting to land this timber, I noticed that there was a bit of variation in these notches, and a bit of investigation has discovered that that's basically due to the way that this timber has been lofted in CAD. So I think in times gone by, some of the other boats that have been built similar to this rear section of this timber would be a solid portion, a larger timber, and then they'd scarf it around about here, probably about where I've scarfed mine, and then it would turn into a lamination up forwards. So actually in the CAD model, this timber's kind of been lofted two different ways. There are a number of ways in which you can arrange a timber like this as it goes throughout the boat, and if you remember the video I did on the shear clamp, we changed the way in which the shear clamp was arranged to make that easier. The chine clamp is also going to be similar. So there are a number of different ways in which you can arrange a timber like this when you loft it in CAD, but also when you install it in the boat, and I'll show you down here on the shear clamp because it's a bit easier to illustrate. So basically you can install this timber like normal to the deck edge. So this edge here, you could install the timber so that it's normal to that, so that that edge is parallel, and then basically you would take the timber out to there, and then you'd shape it to the side. You can also install it so it's normal to the side, so the timber would do this, and then you'd shape the deck edge, you would take it out to there. So what you can see we've got with the chine here is that it twists forwards, so it's normal to the outer face of the framing here, and then it twists around as it goes through. So there's very little shaping to do to the timber. All I'm going to have to do is just bevel off this top edge so that it lands flat with the chine flat section. But then when we get back aft, it had been drawn in the opposite way, which meant that it was turned into a fatter timber here, so it was coming across to account for the fact that the outer face would be shaping. And I wanted to kind of follow on the process of twisting the timber right the way through. This has only been even noticed because of the fact that I've pre-CNC cut everything. So the notches that I had here, I've actually recut these now. The notches I had originally, which are still the original ones on this side, followed that that lofting in CAD, which doesn't really match what I actually wanted to do. So I've had to just slightly alter those notches, and the way I've done that is I've laid the chine flat on here to give me the shape of the outer edge of the chine, and then I've come along and I'm going to follow it with this timber. But to get over the fact that these notches are actually a slightly bit deeper than they should have been, I've cut them even deeper again and evened them out. So now what I'm going to do is put this additional 12mm section in here, which will run from there like that. I will actually just tuck it into that frame so it's not butted up against it. It will run from there back aft. So we'll have 3 layers to this chine clamp from frame 7 aft, and that will go in something approximately like that. As you can see, and then we'll put the third layer aft, second layer forward. We'll put the other layer on the outside of there, and that will make up a thicker chine clamp in the aft section of the boat. I hope I've explained that. I've probably just rambled on about something that's not particularly clear, but basically the way in which this was lofted in CAD was slightly different in the aft sections, and I've wanted to follow the same process all the way on through, so made this slight alteration. So that's what I'll do. I'll get that notched in there, fixed in place, and then I can glue in this initial timber, and then the second one on the outside, these screws will get backed out and it's just going to go onto the outside of there. So that's the next thing, to get all that fixed in place. That is very satisfying. So you can see the ply indicates the line of the finished chine, and then my clamp is now running really nicely just off of that. Of course, we've got that second timber to go on, which is what this is going to be. So by the time I've got that on there, a little bit of shaping, we're going to have a nice chine line. That's looking really good. I am pleased with that. So I'm two-step bonding the chine clamp in. All surfaces get wetted out with unthickened epoxy first, and then I go over them with a thickened epoxy. Now here you can see that I've just put that on with a spreader, and then what I've done is come back with a notch spreader and just run over that to even up the coverage. This might seem like a bit of an unnecessary step and you want to just kind of splodge it on there and let it squirt out, but this gives you a really even glue application across all the surfaces, and it just makes your life easier when it comes to cleanup. You can see here we've got a perfectly even bead around all the edges of that joint when we put that together, and it just means it's really easy to clean up. So things like that would just save you a lot of aggro when it comes to cleaning up epoxy, and that is quite a messy job normally. So when it comes to bonding on the second layer of the chine clamp, I use my variation here to the two-step bonding process and apply a lightly thickened epoxy with a roller to both faces and then assemble the joint immediately. This is a much more feasible option for large laminated timbers such as this one. Quick little tip for you, when you're clamping stuff like this, often you're going to get a bit of slippage one way or another, and sometimes you want to actively slip the piece of wood in one direction. In this instance, I'm looking to push this piece of wood down towards the notch, because I know that it wants to seat in the bottom of that notch. And you can do that by just tweaking the way in which you apply the clamp. So you can see if I apply the clamp starting at an upwards angle like this, as I tighten it, it's going to lift that timber. And the clamp's tipped up just slightly, and as I clamp it, that timber pulls up. Now if I tip that clamp down slightly, I'll do it on this side, because I'm trying to clear the strong back leg. This is an extreme example, but what I'm doing is I'm just lifting that clamp slightly like that as I tighten it. And then what you can see is, as I tighten it, you can see it pushes that timber down. It just slides it down into the bottom of that notch. So I can use that just to push timbers. A lot of the time you actually want to clamp them square, and sometimes you might notice I'll also put a clamp across this way to get the two timbers true. That's another way to kind of override that when you're actually trying to keep things dead straight. But sometimes you want to actually actively push it in one direction. That's how we do it. So again, you can see this outer timber's sitting a little bit high. And if I move the clamp down just slightly as I tighten it, you see that pulls that further up. If I move the clamp up ever so slightly as I tighten it, I can squidge that back down and get it in line. And this scarf is an example of where I'll use a clamp to pull this in line, just to get all of these layers nicely arranged. Pull things to where they want to be. So that's the two outer chine clamp layers on. You can see we've got 3 layers back aft. Then we drop to 2 layers there. Same story again, pretty much cleared out the clamp rack on this one. Only got the dregs left, the ones that haven't got any feet on them anymore, and the ones that are just not very nice. So there we go. 2 chine clamps are in. So that's the keel and the chine clamp bonded in. That's really starting to firm everything up here, tying all those frames together, and this is getting incredibly strong already. You can just kind of feel the stiffness and rigidity that's already going into this boat. I'm gonna get the shear clamp in. That's really gonna kind of lock everything in. And yeah, it's looking really good. I'm pleased with how it's going. So the chine flats will go on next. That's gonna be that stack of plywood layers that you just saw me use. One of them to get the shape of the clamp. And then I'll put that little triangular timber in, which we will land the bottom planking onto. So I shall do that in the next video, and following on from that, I'll move on to shear clamp and topside battens. We took a little bit of a look at the shear clamp, so we'll get back onto that, get that installed. The topside battens will go really nice and quickly, because the notches for those are just make it an absolute breeze. So looking forward to that. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I will catch you in the next episode where I'll be getting the chine flat laminations on. Cheers guys.